far from Olmsted's idyllic suburb, a captain of industry built the perfect town for his workers, or so he hoped. This town's founder was always driven by the bottom line. George Pullman created the palace car, transforming train travel from punishing to pampering. In the process, he became one of the most powerful industrialists of the 19th century.
We can think of him as kind of a Steve Jobs in a certain way, right, for his era. He created demand for this luxury item that so many people felt was a necessity.
His palace cars were such a hit that in 1879, he started planning a new factory south of Chicago that included an adjacent company town, which he named for himself.
He designed the town to be both profitable to his investors, so it would be run as a business, but also to, in his eyes, perfect capitalism. Anything that was a little bit nicer or was an amenity for you couldn't be given to you if it was going to be to the detriment of this town making money for the investors of the company.
Pullman was sure his attractive, efficiently run town would discourage workers from striking.
It was a very, very bold and brave experiment.
Pullman's architect, 26-year-old Solon S. Beeman, took the basic idea of a grid and opened it up with parks, impressive public buildings, and dramatic views.
There were carriage paths in front of these buildings to really reinforce that idea of this being a country, non-urban alternative to sort of the city like Chicago.
Sounds like a paradise.
I think that that's exactly what he would have liked you to have said.
The design of the housing was carefully planned to suit the status of workers up and down the corporate ladder. There's so much variety in housing. Closer to the factory were large homes for the managers, and at the periphery were tenement blocks for unskilled workers.
And this is your part of the village right here?
Come on in.
So this is an original Pullman house.
It sure is. Welcome, Jeffrey.
And you live in it.
I do.
So for a factory worker in this time, this house would have been a big step up, right?
It really would have. These homes were warm, they were lit, you could use the bathroom inside, and you had a lot more space, and just a much nicer feeling home than you would have expected in a typical urban working class neighborhood at the time.
So when you rented a house in Pullman, you signed a 32-page lease?
Yeah, you did. That's really excessive, isn't it? I mean, so no nails in the walls, no flower plantings without prior permission, no front porch sitting.
Well, you couldn't sit on your own front step.
You couldn't. And in fact, there was a dress code for leaving your house.
Pullman even built a town church that he rented out at a profit. The press accused Pullman of behaving like a feudal lord, ruling an industrial serfdom. So there's kind of a famous quote from a resident living in Pullman.
We live in our Pullman houses, we go to work at a Pullman factory, we worship in a Pullman church, and someday we're all going to die and go to a Pullman hell.
In 1893, a financial panic brought tensions to a head between George Pullman and his workers.
What he did is he cut workers' wages, but he didn't cut their rents.
Pullman, the town built to avoid labor unrest, suddenly saw its resident workers walk out on strike.
This made it a national issue because rails weren't moving, and it also became a federal issue because the mail wasn't moving.
President Grover Cleveland called in federal troops to end the standoff. The result? One of the bloodiest strikes in American history.
The strike goes up to the Illinois Supreme Court, where they decide that the company cannot control the housing for its workers.
Pullman contributed to the demise of factory towns in America. As for George Pullman, the loss of his reputation was devastating.
You really felt at the time that he was very misunderstood.
He died of a heart attack 3 years later. His grave was designed by the town architect, Solon S. Beeman.